Hello everybody, welcome back to The Winning Agenda. My name's Jesse Muirman-Marshall and it is fantastic to be here with the Waveshaper Constructed Deck Showcase. So this is part of our Beta Avatar Constructed Showdown with Haine from Wizard's Den. If you haven't checked out Haine's channel, head across to Wizard's Den on YouTube. And if you've been paying attention to the rest of this series, what you will have seen is that Haine and I took the 4 beta avatars that you get in the beta pre-constructed deck set, which has just been launched by Sorcery TCG. So that's this box set here. So we've taken the 4 avatars that you get in this deck set, and I took 2 of them. So I took the 2 on this end, the Waveshaper and the Flamecaller. Haine took the 2 on this end, the Spark Mage and the Geomancer. And we each built a constructed deck by adapting the pre-constructed decks for a constructed metagame. So what I did was I took the Waveshaper deck that comes in this pre-constructed box, and I thought, what can I do to make this a little bit more competitive or to take it to the next level? So I've got here a list of all of the cards that I've kept in, and then all of the cards that I've added, and I'm going to take you through the role that they play in this deck. Let's take a look. So this here is all of the cards that have stayed in the deck from the pre-constructed version. So of course we start off with the Waveshaper itself, the avatar, got to keep that in there. And then we've got a range of sites on the left-hand side. So we've got the rivers, I think there are 7 rivers that stay in the deck, 3 undertows, so 3 copies of that exceptional, 2 copies of Floodplain, and a copy of Maelstrom, which is the unique in the deck. So all of those sites stay in, forming the majority of the Atlas, and then there's a few which we'll add, which you'll see in the next section. Then we've got 2 Anui Undyne, a Tufted Turtles, 2 Pirate Ship, very important beefy minions, 2 Riptides, and 2 Drowns. So the decent core of the deck stays together, and then we've got a bunch of powerful cards that we add in to try and take it to the next level. So this here is the full deck, all laid out, showing you the ones that we kept in. So there's a couple of Pirate Ships, Tufted Turtle, Unland Eel, and a few of these spells, along with all the cards that we're adding in to take that Waveshaper deck to, hopefully, some constructed deck victories. So if you want to see this deck in action, I should say at the outset, you can check out the match of me playing it against Haine's Spark Mage deck, which is up on the channel, and you can see Haine's Spark Mage deck tech and his perspective on that game on his channel over at Wizard's Den. So a little bit more about all of the things that I've tried to put into this deck to make it just that little bit better and improve the functionality and try and get the best out of the Waveshaper. So the first aspect that's worth mentioning is the Waveshaper's ability itself. So of course it says tap, play or draw a site. It's also got tap, flood a site near your body of water until you do so again. Tap minions without submerge there. They don't untap the next time they would. So what the Waveshaper says, basically, is that at the point in the game where you're willing to start tapping your avatar, so you no longer need to be tapping it to play sites using that first ability, at the point in the game where you can afford to start tapping it to use its other ability, you get to both flood a site, which is not previously a water site, so that turns it into a water site, and it means that any of your minions or card effects that care about water sites can now make use of that site. So it means, for example, that you can flood an enemy site and you can turn it into a water site that your Pirate Ship can attack, because Pirate Ship, of course, is waterbound. So Waveshaper and Pirate Ship, very best friends. You know, Waveshaper actually enables you to attack with your Pirate Ship against decks that aren't playing any water sites of their own. Similarly, it allows your Anui Undyne, which has Anui Undyne has +1 power for each site in her body of water. It allows her to attack onto your opponent's site that wasn't previously a water site without reverting to her printed 0 power, which wouldn't be great. So Waveshaper works very well with those 2 beefy mid-range minions in water. But what it really requires is that you're actually willing to start tapping your avatar and no longer playing sites, which sort of puts an effective cap on how many sites you can expect to have in play when you want to be attacking and using those minions like Pirate Ship and Anui Undyne to really press the point and take some advantage to your opponent. So what do these cards that I'm holding here do to help with that? They are all our acceleration package. So if we want to get to the point where we can be tapping our Waveshaper for its second ability as soon as possible, we want to get some acceleration into the deck so that we can hopefully get some early tempo and build our mana base so that we don't need to keep tapping our Waveshaper to develop our board in the middle of the game. So Philosopher's Stone says the first spell of each element cast by the bearer each turn costs 1 mana less. So this is going to make all our spells 1 cheaper if they're the first spell on the turn, which is sort of like getting a spell, being the Philosopher's Stone, and turning it into a site, because effectively giving us 1 mana every turn. So it's just mana acceleration in this deck. Aquamarine Core fulfills a similar role. It costs 1, it provides us a water threshold, and 1 mana every turn. Again, giving us just that little bit of acceleration on an ongoing basis, so hopefully we can play 1 fewer site before we need to stabilize. Or we can play 1 fewer site before we can stabilize nicely and then start tapping our Waveshaper for its ability. Mix Aqua similarly says, tap Mix Aqua, this turn the bearer's next water spell requires no threshold and costs 3 less to cast. So it's an even more substantial reduction, but it's only 1 time. So this is more effective at getting out sort of one of our beefy minions, perhaps an Anui Undyne, or allowing us to play something like the Great Old One. Even though we don't want to get up to 8 sites in play, we can still use a Mix Aqua and play the Great Old One off 5 sites in play. So it allows us to have that kind of power card in the deck at the really high cost level. And I should emphasize, for those of you who aren't familiar, Great Old One, 8 cost, but 16 power. So certainly powerful, the most powerful minion in Alpha in terms of raw power. And it's got this pretty cool ability that says permanently flood the entire realm, including voids, which obviously synergizes really well with the pirate ship and the Anui Undyne that I mentioned earlier, by turning the whole realm, so the whole board, into something that they can make use of, and in Anui's case, be pumped by. So all these acceleration pieces enable our deck, they enable our Waveshaper to function a little bit more effectively, and for us to be able to be getting into that zone more quickly and more effectively, where we can be tapping our Waveshaper for its powerful ability every turn if we want to. Because one thing that you'll see as you play through more games with Waveshaper is that once you start using the ability, you often need to keep using it to keep things locked down. So both the flood part of its ability is important, but the lockdown part of its ability is also important. So that first part that says flood a site near your body of water till you do so again, very important for enabling your pirate ships and things. But the tapping minions without submerge there and them not untapping next time they would, sometimes you need to keep doing that once you start in order to be able to keep up your aggression. So the next lot of cards that I really wanted to highlight is this group of cards that can give us card advantage, because when you're playing an avatar that doesn't have a card advantage ability inherent in it, it's got actually what's really a tempo ability and an ability that synergizes with some of our water-based effects. We really need to be careful that we don't just get overrun by Sorcerer, which can tap to draw an extra spell every turn, or some of the other avatars like Deathspeaker that just have inbuilt card advantage, basically. So we really need to leverage the best of the card advantage tools that water gives us. So the first one is Captain Baldassar. It's a unique, so you can only have one of them in your deck. It's a 4-cost 3-power minion that says whenever Captain Baldassar attacks a unit or site, the defending player discards their topmost 3 spells, and you may cast each of those spells once this turn, ignoring threshold requirements. So you can basically steal cards from the top of your opponent's deck and play them. As long as you've got the mana, you don't even need the threshold. So Captain Baldassar is a great way to get card advantage. He's obviously quite expensive at 4 for only 3 power, but if you can protect him and get him down on a board that's empty or where you suspect your opponent might not be able to remove him, then he can do a lot of damage in terms of card advantage. The next piece of card advantage is a similar version but a little bit weaker, so it's an exceptional mortal Sea Raider, 3 cost for 3 power. Whenever it attacks and kills an enemy, its controller discards their topmost spell. You may cast that spell once this turn, ignoring threshold. So a smaller version of Captain Baldassar. It doesn't work on sites in the same way Baldassar does, so it's a little harder to get use out of its ability, but it's still pretty powerful with something that's got decent stats at 3 for 3 to be able to be threatening to get some card advantage. Then we've got Atlantean Fate, which is a very, very powerful removal spell and also mana denial in a roundabout way as well, or threshold denial, I should say. So it's a 5-cost aura, so it affects 4 sites on the board, anywhere on the board you want to place it, 4 locations. It can overlap the void as well. It says, affected non-ordinary sites are flooded. They are water sites, only provide water threshold and lose all other abilities. So if you play this and your opponent's got some earth, air, dual sites out, all of a sudden those earth, air, dual sites just become water sites. So they're water sites, which is helpful, as I've mentioned many times, for the Anui Undynes to be able to get pumped by them and attack onto them, and similar for the pirate ships. But also they lose their other threshold and they lose all their other abilities. Then it also says, Genesis, submerge all minions and artifacts atop affected sites. So all of the sites that this affects, whether they're ordinary or not, all minions and artifacts get submerged, which means that if they don't have the submerge ability, then they're going to die. And if they are artifacts, then they're just going to get submerged and sit underneath the water, likely unable to be recovered by your opponent. So Atlantean Fate can be a very powerful source of card advantage because you can get rid of multiple of your opponent's threats, on multiple sites because it affects 4, but you can also deny them some threshold along the way. Riptide is another piece of card advantage because it replaces itself. So it says draw a card. It doesn't in and of itself deliver you a card's worth of value from the rest of its abilities, but this deck has some sneaky ways to actually turn it into a card that takes away one of their cards and then replaces itself, which is net card advantage for you. So for 2 mana, you get to have target water site, pull in an above ground unit it's adjacent to, and then draw a card. So that might just seem like, well, all you're doing there is really moving minions around. How can that deliver you a card's worth of value? Well, this deck plays a couple of sites that can actually remove your enemy minions from the board. So we have the Bottomless Pit and the Free City, which if we can turn them into water sites, because Riptide says target water site pulls in an above ground unit it's adjacent to, then we can pull our enemy's minions or avatar into Free City or Bottomless Pit. So if we pull them onto Free City, we can attack them for 3, because once per turn, Free City may attack or defend against enemy units here. And if they're a minion, we can pull them onto Bottomless Pit, and if they don't have Airborne, then the Bottomless Pit will kill them. So how do we flood these 2 sites to turn them into water sites so that our Riptide can pull the enemy onto them? We use a site called Floodplain. And Floodplain you do get 2 copies of in the pre-constructed deck. And Floodplain says once on your turn, you may flood an adjacent site this turn. So if you have that adjacent to your Free City or your Bottomless Pit, so they're next to each other, the Floodplain can simply flood the Free City, turning it into a water site, and then the Riptide can pull your enemies onto the Free City. The Free City can attack them, and voila, you've removed an enemy minion from the board, and your Riptide has replaced itself because it draws a card. So this is one of the key ways that we try to get card advantage as well as some tempo advantage on our opponent. Narcotic Manuscript and Plague of Frogs is another 2-card combo that we can try and pull off to get more significant card advantage. So Narcotic Manuscript is an artifact that says Bearer has tap, reveal your topmost spell and draw it. Bearer takes damage equal to that card's cost. Plague of Frogs, on the other hand, summons 7 little frog tokens. So if these frog tokens, which are minions, pick up the Narcotic Manuscript, the first one can tap, effectively draw us a card, and that'll kill the frog. Then the second frog can pick up the manuscript that's just dropped and do the same thing. So effectively, this is a 2-card combo that lets us draw 7 cards, which is pretty strong. There's also the Tadpole Pool, which is a site that creates 3 frog tokens, and of course we've got a copy of that in the deck as well. So Genesis summon 3 submerged frog tokens here. We can give those frogs the manuscript, and they can read it. Unfortunately, die in the process, but give us 3 cards, which is pretty cool. So using that card advantage and those tempo tools, we're looking to get out some beefy minions, whether it's Pirate Ship or Anui Undine. We've got 4 copies of Pirate Ship and 3 copies of Anui in the deck. And if we can keep them on the board and use our Waveshaper's ability to flood some sites in our opponent's side of the board so that we can attack with them, we can use our removal tools, whether it's Drowns, which submerges a minion or an artifact so it can kill something on a water site, or Frost Nova, which can freeze all nearby enemy minions and disable them until end of turn. And of course, disabled minions don't strike back. So if we were to have our Waveshaper up or nearby to any enemy minions, if we cast Frost Nova, then one of our bigger minions can come in and pick off the enemy minion for free without being struck back, for example. So Frost Nova can be helpful in that way at allowing our pirate ships to trade with, earth, air, mid-range minions, things that have 4 or 5 power, and our pirate ships don't actually die. They'll survive because the enemies will be frozen. So Frost Nova and Drown can help with the removal, but of course, the Waveshaper does have that inbuilt pseudo removal of being able to tap minions without submerge. So it allows us to clear the path, if you like, for our hopefully beefier mid-range minions to deal some significant blows on our opponent's side of the board, and then we can use the removal and the other minions that we can play from our 1 card that we draw a turn to hopefully keep adding pressure to the board while our opponent drowns under the weight of the Waveshaper's ability. So this is the atlas for the deck. It's relatively simple. It's sort of effectively broken up into 4 parts, which I've got in the 4 columns here. So the first is the uniques on this side. So we've got Tadpole Pool, Mirror Realm, and Maelstrom. They all give us a different benefit. So Tadpole Pool, in concert with the Narcotic Manuscript, can give us card draw, as we mentioned earlier. Mirror Realm says This site enters the realm as a copy of another nearby site, so it can give us a copy of a tadpole pool or a copy of one of our free city or bottomless pit. Basically, it's a wild card that can give us what we need depending on where we are at in the game, which is especially powerful in a deck that has different types of sites that fulfill different roles. Then the Maelstrom is a positional site, which says at the start of your turn, you may pull each minion in this body of water one step. So if you have permanently flooded a free city or a bottomless pit, because this doesn't actually work with floodplain because it happens in the phase of the turn before floodplain can flood something for the turn. But if you've permanently flooded a free city or a bottomless pit or flooded it with Waveshaper, then you can use Maelstrom to pull units that are adjacent to it into the bottomless pit or the free city to accomplish a similar thing to what Riptide does. So Maelstrom gives us just some more flexibility in terms of pulling minions and causing those free kills off our sites, if you like. Undertow fulfills a similar role to Maelstrom, except it actually does synergize with Floodplain, which is pretty cool. So it says, Genesis, staying within this body of water, move target unit one step. So if we've got our Floodplain that has flooded a free city or a bottomless pit on our turn, then subsequently we can tap our Waveshaper, play an Undertow, and push a unit onto that flooded free city or bottomless pit. Then, of course, the key stars of the show are the two free city and two bottomless pit. You could play 3 free city, but I've only got 2 because you do need to be careful not to compromise the sizes of your body of water and the number of water sites that you have, given how important bodies of water are to this deck. So I've sort of landed on 2 free city and 2 bottomless pit being the optimal way to go. Bottomless pit, of course, you can only play 2 because they are an elite. And then we have 7 copies of the basic rivers. So they say, Genesis, look at your next spell. You may put it on the bottom of your spellbook. That's just because, as I said, water sites are relatively important, and these are probably the best remaining water sites currently for us to play from the remaining card pool. I think as the card pool expands into the future sets, these are the sorts of things that will be easily replaced and upgraded in this deck, but there's certainly a decent baseline for us to start with. And they do, the fact that we've got 7 rivers in the deck, which all come in the pre-constructed deck, does make it a little bit easier to pull this together from the upgraded precon. So I hope you enjoyed our Waveshaper deck tech today. It's a deck that I've really loved playing. Please let me know in the comments your thoughts on Waveshaper or any of the other decks and avatars in the pre-constructed deck set. As I said, please check out Haine's video on the Spark Mage. Check out our game where we play the 2 decks against each other, and you can see my deck tech on the Flamecaller deck on the channel as well as Haine's deck tech on the Geomancer and our gameplay between those 2 avatars. So plenty of content out there about Beta. We're super excited. Thanks to the Sorcery team for having us involved in previewing these avatars from a constructed perspective, and I hope you all enjoy diving into some constructed play with these new avatars in Sorcery Contested Realm. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!